For instance, I'd go out on a run saying, I'm going to run a marathon someday. And then I'd go out and run 6 miles, and then I couldn't walk for like a week. And so I didn't understand that there was a real process to developing. So what the habit factor is all about in a couple words or terms is habit alignment is one, and habit strength is how you build automaticity.
Are you a busy professional who's crushing it in your career or in growing your business, but you're struggling to lose weight and transform your body while fitting in your social life as well as your work obligations? If the answer is yes, well, let me help you get into the best shape of your life while thriving in your business. Go to legendarylifepodcast.com/apply and schedule a 15-minute strategy call with me today. What is up, my friend, and welcome back to the Legendary Life Podcast. I'm your host, Ted Rice, health expert and coach to founders, entrepreneurs, and other high-performing professionals. Today, we have a special guest on the show. His name is Martin Grunburg. He is the creator of the Habit Factor app, as well as the author of the international best-selling book, sharing the same name. Now, I have a story about how I got Martin on the show. I know that James Clear is like the current reigning king of habit creation with his great book, Atomic Habits. But I got to tell you something. I started reading Atomic Habits, and you may love it and you may hate me for saying this, but I just couldn't get into it. I felt like it was a little complicated. And even though I enjoyed, and just to be clear here, I listened to the audiobook. I wasn't reading it. And James, I thought, did a great job of narrating it, but I just couldn't get into it. And when I started talking to Martin, I found out that Martin has been doing this way longer. And when he started sharing his method for creating habits and sharing the different approaches and frameworks he uses, I was like, man, I got to have this guy on the show. It really clicked with me. And what I love about it is the simplicity. In fact, just from talking with him and reading a little bit of his book, I've started implementing these same methods in my own coaching business because they're excellent. So if you are a fan of habits, creating habits, changing habits, breaking bad ones, then you are going to love this interview. And of course, if you like James, great. This is just another way of framing habit development, how to look at them. And Martin shares some just what I feel is game-changing information. That is it. So without further ado, let's step into this interview with Martin Grunburg. Hey, Martin, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Really excited to speak to you, man.
It's an honor and a privilege, Ted Rice. I'm a huge fan.
Oh, thanks so much. And you had me on your show, but the reality is you're an OG rock star in the coaching world. And you have this book about habits that came out way before James Clear's Atomic Habits book. So for the people, there you go, the habit factor. We can talk about some of this, but what I want to get into first is I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey. Like, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. And I was chuckling at the OG reference because I guess I have to go with it. I've heard that. So I was just the day before, I was up at USC presenting on this stuff. And this professor, Glenn Fox, introduced me the same way to all his like 150 students and pretty much said the exact same thing. So the origin story, I think you know some of it, and I recount it in the Habit Factor. And there's some parallels now when I think about it and your story and really the genesis of change. It has to do with negative emotions. And there's a lot in the coaching world about, either avoid or get rid of or ignore the negative emotions. And I think in hindsight, through experience, I've learned that there's tremendous value in that. And we'll circle back to that. But in that state, I was 35. And from the outside looking in, I mean, I was probably married 5 years. I had a 3-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old daughter. So married 5 years, I'm 35 years old. The business is doing 2-ish million. I got 23 employees and I'm miserable, dude. I'm truly and I can't put my finger on it. It sounds ridiculous. It's almost like a midlife crisis, premature midlife crisis. So 35, depressed, and I went through, and I feel like I've told you this, but I went through a Tony Robbins, the rocking chair exercise. You pretend you're 80, 85, and you're reflecting on a great life, because I was so depressed in the moment and I didn't know where to go, which way. So I go through this exercise and I ratchet it up kind of organically or naturally. And what I mean by that is I went from 85 reflecting on a great life to I have died tomorrow. And what do I most regret not doing or achieving? And so it became this bucket list exercise. So this is, almost 20 years ago. And the crazy part of it is something came to the top of the list, which surprised me. It's called the Catalina Classic. It's a paddleboarding event. You paddle 32 miles with your arms laying on a board, from Catalina Island to Manhattan Beach. And I was shocked. That's at the top of the list. And I'm like, how, this is so weird. So from 17 years old to 35, 18 years, this was a suppressed ambition or goal. And yet here I was 18 years later, hadn't done it. So I challenged myself, and this is I'll wrap it up. I challenged myself. You're either signing up now. And by the way, I didn't have a paddleboard. I never paddled 1 mile. And I say, you're either signing up now or forget about it forever. And next thing I knew, literally, I'm like flying downstairs. I'm looking, it's kind of the early days of the web, but I'm looking for a way to sign up. I pay $200 ish, I think a little more. And then I'm signed up. And then I panic because I'm like, holy shit, what did I just do? I'm committed to a 32-mile paddle. I don't even have a paddleboard. I've never paddled. So insane pressure. And that's another topic we can get into. But that started my journey, because from that, I had to figure out, how am I going to achieve this goal? And it came down to the rhythm of the week, identifying core supportive habits. The best practices of the time, if you really want to talk OG school, is best practices were SMART goals. And they still kind of are, which is a little disappointing. Problem with the SMART goal is you get a to-do list, and you could have, is it 100 items? Is it 200 items? When does it stop? And so the habit factor, which would become the habit factor, says it's less about a to-do list and it's more about core recurring behaviors, habits. So anyways, I end up identifying what I'm going to do over the rhythm of the week. And it's not that I have to do it every day. So I'm like, I need to paddle 20 minutes Monday, Wednesday, Friday. For instance, I need to run 6 miles a week to get conditioning. I need to eat better. And then I just started tracking this on this ugly tracking sheet, which still exists today. It's been downloaded, 100,000 plus times. The app, like 250,000 times. So, but it all started from that. And that's why I'm saying there's value in it sounds crazy a bit, probably poor choice of language, but to find the value in the depression, in the frustration, in the anger, there's something there with some reflection. So I'll leave it at that. That's where it started.
Man, and please, what we love here is to expand on this story, right? So don't hold the juicy details back at all, please. People can get your book and get into it for sure if they want to talk strategy, and we'll get into that too, Martin. But you have such a fascinating story, and so it was this Catalina Classic 32-mile open ocean race, and you've done it 4 times. So a total of 4 times, right?
Yeah, that first year I gave myself, so it happened to be my 35th birthday when I'm going through this angst, and nobody really knows. My wife doesn't know, the kids don't know, but I'm just upstairs and I'm meditating, and I'm just like, the trajectory I was on, it didn't feel right. And so, there's a classic, if you're a fan of old school, Stephen Covey, the 7 habits, well, the second one is begin with the end in mind. And so for me, if beginning with the end in mind is important, and it is, the ultimate end in mind is your obituary exercise, right? That is the place I think everybody should begin. And it's interesting that I say that because the gal who wrote I think she's on the cover. No, she's not. Her name is Roz Savage. So she writes the foreword. As I'm writing the book, she blogs about the app, how she's using it. I'm like, I need to look up this woman. Turns out this woman has rowed solo across the Atlantic, the Pacific, in a rowboat solo.
Whoa.
In the Indian Oceans. At the time, it was just, I can't believe I'm saying just, it was just the Atlantic. And so once we became fast friends, I invited her to write the foreword. And the reason I'm sharing that story is when you read the foreword, she had the same sort of epiphany. She was a management consultant. She felt like it was a soulless experience, and she just abandoned essentially a marriage, a career, and jumped in a boat to be an eco-activist. Now, I'm not saying everybody should do something like that, but what I am saying is we share a parallel experience with our obituary exercises, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and Martin, I'm curious, like we'll focus on you, of course, because Ross isn't here, but why do you think, so you're in a business, you're making millions a year, you got 23 employees, if I remember the number correctly. From the outside in, you're crushing it. So, and this is 20 years ago. So, especially you making millions in that time. Wow. Why do you think it was a paddle? Like, why do you think that came up and that was the catalyst to everything? I mean, I get, okay, you signed up for this event and you got to develop the habits to compete and not, have people come and fish you out of the ocean or helicopter rescue. But why do you think it was something like a race and something physical? Was there something else that you can share about that?
Yeah, there is. There's two angles, and I hope I remember both of them. One is I grew up in LA. I surfed Malibu all the time, so I was part of this surf culture. And I'm looking at these magazines, and every year I get the magazine, and they're like the Catalina Classic, and you see the happiest dudes. It was mostly guys back then. I can't remember. Like they're just glowing, and they just paddled 32 miles. And anyways, you're seeing these images year over year over year, and you're immersed in that culture. And every year I said, someday I'm going to do that. Someday I'm going to do that. Someday I'm going to do that. And then obviously that faded away. And next thing I know, I'm 35 and I'm like, what the F? Like, what happened to what happened to my life? So it was always a someday I'll, which, Brian Tracy likes to say, someday I'll is an island nobody wants to be on, right? Someday I'll. The other aspect is, I guess, maybe because I had been somewhat competitive and athletic, I think it just fits. And this was the other angle, Ted, and I think you'll appreciate it. Now, when we coach, we go through the 4 core pillars of wellness. And this is, when I look back, this is really the answer. The big answer is, so the 4 core pillars, as you probably know, mind, body, social, and spiritual. And what was really lacking was the body component. Like I was learning relative to the mind. I was doing a lot of learning. I was part of a great...
You're meditating.
Yeah, exactly. And I was part of a great social network, an entrepreneur network, but the body aspect was missing. And I think looking back, I can see that now. My body was weak. My body was not strong. And then I can only see that now when I'm talking to you. In fact, I don't think I've ever written that anywhere, but that's the assessment I do when we coach. It's the 4 core pillars, and just knowing which one needs attention helps lead you toward the habits that will bolster those aspects of wellness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Martin. And I'm curious, you said you were surfing and you were immersed in surfing culture. Had you gotten out of shape while running your business? Why do you say that you were weak?
So just to give you an example, I sensed it like I was in surfing condition, but I would, I would say,
I'm not a surfer, so maybe it doesn't take that much energy or.
no, it does. But you can be conditioned to one thing and not another. So for instance, I'd go out on a run saying, I'm going to run a marathon someday. And then I'd go out and run 6 miles and then I couldn't walk for like a week. And so I didn't understand that there was a real process to developing. So what the habit factor is all about in a couple words or terms is habit alignment is one, and habit strength is how you build automaticity. So between those two, to go out and have a burst of energy to go run 6 miles is foolish if you've never run before. So anyways, going back to that tracking sheet is a process to up the ante. You track for 4 weeks and then you raise the bar, and that's how you develop habit strength. So yes, I was in surfing condition, but I wasn't in great condition, and I certainly wasn't challenging myself. You
Mm.
The other angle or answer probably is I was comfortable. So by committing to a ridiculous event like that, without owning a board and giving myself 6 months to figure it out, that I got uncomfortable very quick. And then, you want to talk about the gory details. When I bought a board on Craigslist, 14-foot paddleboard, I'm so excited. I live right next to the bay in San Diego. I bring it down to the bay and I get these things are this wide, barely. I mean, my shoulders hang off of them. So they're this wide. A surfboard's like this. So anyways, I get on this thing. I just bought it. I've committed and I take one stroke and I fall off. And then I feel so bad. I get back on. I take another stroke. I fall. The point is, these things are such precise machines. You have to be so balanced. So paddling a surfboard, paddling a paddleboard, totally different. I didn't know that. So adding to all the pressure, all of a sudden I've paid, I've put down the deposit. I'm trying to train and I can't even paddle 10 feet without falling off. And I'm committed to a 32-mile event. It's ludicrous. I wanted to cry, truly cry right there that first day. And it took a week before I could paddle 20 minutes without falling off the board. So it's just, yeah, there's a few different angles to look at this thing from.
So let's you talked about habit alignment and habit strength. Can you talk first about habit alignment? I think I know what you mean by that, but just so I'm clear and everyone listening is clear, what does that mean?
What it means is it's a bit beginning with the end in mind. So if my goal is to write a book, and by the way, I never wanted to write a book. I never knew I was going to write 3 books. You begin with the end in mind. And frankly, the end, if it's a book, the question is what habits are going to be supportive of the goal? And obviously the first one is writing. Now I said, I'm not a writer. I've never written. How am I going to do this? Habit alignment is simply identifying the core supportive behaviors, the habits that will help you get there. And then it's about tracking them following this OG process called PAR, plan, act, record, and reassess. And then there are various elements within that. So you can stop me if I'm getting too in the weeds. But for instance, when I'm beginning to write, and I've never written, it would be foolish to say, I'm going to write 2 hours a day every day. I would be setting myself up for absolute failure. Fortunately, and I'm not sure how I was aware of this, but I was like, I'm only going to write 20 minutes 3 times a week. And by setting the target low, so this tracking sheet, Ted, has a couple core ingredients. One is the T. I don't know where that, there's a T column. It's the white column and then the A column. So the point is you're just using ones and zeros, and you have 20 minutes Monday. And then if you achieve it, you add a 1. If you don't, you put a 0. And it's just very binary tracking system. Today, a lot of habit trackers, honestly, I think make a huge mistake. They just have writing and then there's an X or a check. The question is, Are you supposed to be writing every day? Are you supposed to be writing for 20 minutes, for 40 minutes? Is it 6 pages? Is it 8 pages? In other words, what's the minimum success criteria? Do I do 5 push-ups or do I do 50 push-ups? So there's 2 core elements. One's the rhythm of the week, or the frequency per week when it comes to par. And then the other is the minimum success criteria. Is it 10 push-ups or is it 50 push-ups? And by setting the bar low in your initial 4 weeks of tracking, you have success. And then you elevate the bar the next 4 weeks. So instead of 20 minutes of writing, it's now 30. And instead of 3 days, it's 4 days. And then when you get through 4 weeks, if you're 85% or better, right? That's kind of the criteria we've figured out over decade plus. 85% or better, you raise the bar. If you have not hit your targets, you do not raise them. And if you're grossly missing, you have to check some core things. You either lower the bar or you check desire. Usually desire is lacking.
I want to dive into this. This is fascinating and it's so simple. One of the things that about Atomic Habits from James Clear, I love James as a writer. I just couldn't get into the book though, even though it's got a ton of great ideas. Forgive me if you're listening right now and that's your favorite book, but I couldn't get into it, even though I like James, would love to have him on the show, et cetera. But what I love about you is I don't think James, and I could be wrong about this, is a coach. And he may not work with people, but what I hear you saying, I'm like, man, I do some of what he's talking about right now with my clients. And I know James has actually talked about some of this stuff, but it's just, you have a tangible sort of like, oh man, how do we figure this out for people? I really like it. So I want to talk a little bit about this because what most people do is they try to do too much.
Right.
And then, I get high performers. I work with founders, entrepreneurs, busy professionals. And I'm like, hey, I always ask them, how many times a week do you want to work out? Oh yeah, let's do, I think 5 or 6. And I'm like, cool. How confident are you on a scale 1 to 10 that you're going to be able to do that for every week in this program for as long as we're working together? Let's say the 4 or 6 months, 1 year, whatever. And they're like, well, maybe like a 7. And I'm like, okay. And let me ask you this. When you miss one of those workouts, how are you going to feel? Are you going to be cool with it? Like, no, I'm going to feel like a total loser. And I'm like, then why are you setting yourself up for failure? And these are smarter people than me, more successful people than me, right? But we do this stuff. And you said something fascinating. You don't raise the bar unless you're 85% nailing it, because why are you going to ask yourself to do more?
Right.
And then you said something else fascinating, and I want to hear your wisdom about this because you've been a coach for longer than me. You said desire. If someone's not hitting it, it's desire. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that? And
Absolutely.
Then maybe we can explore how to help someone find the desire, how you help someone find the desire.
Yeah, well, so I'm going to quickly scribble some things, and I don't know if it's going to work. Do you see that? That's the three circles.
Yeah, I should have said this, man. Most of the people are going to listen to this on audio and not going to see the video.
My bad. So I'm looking at us on video. So imagine 3 circles intersecting, right? And there are 3 criteria that are, it's like do not pass go. If you think you're going to develop a habit and the desire is lacking, so that's criteria number 1, desire. That means different things to different people, commitment, etc. But really, there has to be sincere desire to cultivate. So, for instance, the other day, somebody said, "When should I give up?" When should I give up? I was like, I've been tracking and it's not working. When should I give up? I'm like, is there desire? We just talked about this. So desire is 1. And it's do not pass go. That's number 1. Now, to be fair to everybody, people think all the time the desire is there, Ted, until the rubber meets the road. That's why tracking is so important. As soon as somebody begins tracking and you get data, and the data doesn't reflect the desire, it's the desire's missing. So we'll come back to that. The next one is knowledge. So if the habit is brushing my teeth, do I have the desire to brush my teeth? Yes or no? If it's a yes, great. Do I have the knowledge? Yes. Now
Really simple.
the third one is been mistaken even by the great Stephen Covey. He says it's skill. Now, there's a slight twist to that because skills and habits are really the same. And I'll come around to that. It's capacity to perform the behavior. That's the third one. Capacity. So that just means, can I hold the toothbrush and can I move it around my mouth? It's not a skill. It's the capacity to perform the behavior. So it's desire, knowledge, and capacity to perform the behavior. But desire is El numero uno, do not pass go if the desire is not there.
I want to talk more about this because this is something, something I deal with a lot. I help entrepreneurs, specifically founders, busy professionals transform their body. And these are people who have a strong desire, at least they believe, to do it. And one of the reasons I hop on a call with people to make sure they're right for the program is to assess that, because it's work. Right. You got to work out.
Yeah, it's a waste of everybody's.
Exactly. And, I've even had people pay me money and disappear after a while. And while that felt good in my 20s, now I feel like a failure when that happens. Like what I do isn't good. And so how can someone assess their desire? Like, how do they really know they want to do something?
So the honest answer, and by the way, you're never a failure if somebody's checking out on you. You know that, but that's on them. The honest answer is you don't know. Nobody knows. You're doing the right thing in my estimation by qualifying them as best you can. But nobody knows until the rubber meets the road and they're producing tracking data, because that comes, guess how quickly that comes? One day at a time, just like success. It never comes quicker to anybody than one day at a time, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So desire, we're going to, it's almost like it's a validator. Every day you show up. Now, and when I say every day, I just mean on your target days. There's so many myths about habits. It's overwhelming for people. The fact they think they got to do something every day. They think it takes 14 days or 21 days or 66 days. That's all. Yeah. I hate to say it, but it's garbage, right? You can skip days. And so when the PAR method came out, Ted, it came out, 12-ish years ago. There were no studies really that backed so much of what I was proposing. And it was all intuitive, through my experience. And today, I'm happy to say there are now studies backing the PAR method and the principles and ideas behind it. So the idea that you can use intention to cultivate habit, a lot of the science is based on this habit loop, cue routine reward or cue craving. That's cute and it's nice, but it's not, you are not a rodent. I am not a rodent. We have choice, we have intention, and we have reflection. And that's where PAR comes in. Plan, act, record, reassess. That's a human habit building technique.
I love that. Yeah, it's right with some of the, I forget his name, Charles Duhigg wrote this book, and it was very well written and really confusing. When it's like, okay, how do we take this science and really make it work for people?
Exactly. Thank you. And his book came out like 2 years after the Habit Factory, approximately.
Let me ask you about what you said then. So the PAR, the plan, act, record, and reassess, that makes so much sense. But you talked about the other things as well. You listed 3 things. Can you mention them again?
Absolutely. Desire, knowledge, and capacity to perform the behavior.
Yeah, I got that. I think that's fairly easy to understand. But you said we're not rodents. We have these other things.
Yep. Oh, got it. My apologies. Choice. You can choose. So animals, so the habit loop, if you're not familiar, it really originated. They were putting a mice or a mouse or a rat in a maze, Ted, and then there would cheese at the other end. And they're like, well, the first time it took him 10 minutes to find the cheese. The second time it took him 7 minutes. The third time he got it in 2 minutes. And they're like, oh, that's how habits are built.
Gotcha. Interesting.
My point is that the rodent doesn't sit in the
Some
maze.
Some of us don't like cheese.
Yeah, and some of the well, no, it's a good point, and there's a few aspects there. The question is, if I go run 6 miles, I don't need to eat a piece of cake. I don't need to eat cheese. The self-efficacy. Are you familiar with that term, self-efficacy? It just means the ability to produce a desired result. My contention for 12 plus years is you want the real piece of cheese. It's when you check off this and you're like, F yeah, because I said I was going to do 20 push-ups on Monday and I did it. And then I was going to drink 6 glasses of water and I did it. And then you write in the comments, I killed it today. That's your cheese. That's your cake. That's self-efficacy. Now it works against you if you set the bar too high and you don't follow through. And then we can get into mindset, etc. But that's the huge difference. We are human. Animals aren't crafting habits at will aligned to their goals. They have instincts that's aligned to basically 2 goals: procreate and survive. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, and eat, but that's part of survival.
Yeah. Martin, do you have a story you could tell about a client who maybe was struggling because the bar was set too high and what you did to help them through that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, in a general sense, so this one person, I won't reveal sex, was a PhD, absolutely brilliant, and had terrifically high expectations. And when the rubber met the road, the tracking data was inconsistent. And really what we realized, and hopefully we'll get to the 3 circles at some point, was that the environment was not conducive, meaning she had out of state, he had out of state HOA issues and this sort of thing. So that's just an example of, something I get into. The Habit Factor was the first book, but then my baby that I love so much, which is left to the side, is The Pressure Paradox, which is the second book. Really an investigation into environment and how pressure influences our productivity, performance, and peace of mind. And then the third book, of course, is Everything. It's about our thinking in terms of stories. So, but yeah, that's an example where it proves that when we're trying to achieve things, we need harmony, congruence, alignment across not just. Here's a bit of a soundbite. So it's mindset, skill set, and environment.
Mm-hmm.
These 3.
Those are the 3 circles you were talking about.
That's right. Yeah. And any client that struggles with just one of them, and the tracking data isn't going to, hopefully with the track, what happens is change, as you know, is actuated in the habits and skills arena, which is that middle concentric circle. So change is actuated there. If it's not happening, then it means we need to either look at our thinking or our environment to determine or desire. Is that clear?
Yeah, sure. Mindset, skill set, environment. You can have the desire. You can have the hey, I can do things. I'm successful. You can learn the skills and develop them. But
right.
If I'm thinking of clients right now who their environment keeps sabotaging them because they're in a relationship that is without going and sharing details, it's out of congruence with what they're trying to achieve in terms of their body transformation. People are bringing home alcohol and food, and right, kids are bringing home
potato chips all over the place. Yep.
Yeah. And then even if you have the skills, know what to do, you have the right mindset, how long can anyone say no to chocolate cookies sitting on the counter? You can say no maybe 99 days out of 100, but you're going to give in eventually.
Yep. And so it's just a reminder that as a coach to always be helping the client realize that it's a three-pronged attack. Now, you could throw in the fourth with the feelings and emotions, but what I posit in this new book is that because feelings and emotions are ephemeral, they're both incredibly important, and over the long haul, they're not significant. I mean, over a 5-year span of losing weight, is it really going to matter if I was sad or depressed? Or now it could if, I mean, from one moment to the next, emotions and feelings can change the trajectory of our life in a second. You could have road rage and that emotion ruined your life because you pulled out a gun and shot somebody or they shot you, right? So, but over a 5-year transformation. And are you familiar with a guy? You should have him on your show if you if he'll do it. He's kind of low key, but his name's Ryan Hall. Have you heard of him?
No, I know a Brazilian jiu-jitsu champ named that, but I don't think that's who you're talking about.
So you would love this guy, dude. I mean, he first of all, this story is ridiculous. It's all over my book, and he and I chat or exchanged emails. So he was the U.S.'s United States fastest marathoner. So he weighed 129 pounds and he ran a 2-hour and 4-minute marathon, which I'm not sure I can run a half marathon in 2 hours, right?
Incredible.
Just like fathom that. He's the fastest at the half marathon as well. And 59 minutes or something insane. Is that, yeah, 59 minutes. 59 minutes. So less than an hour, 13 miles. So here's where I'm going with this. Follow me. He's 129 pounds. He stops running at like 34 professionally. He decides that he wants to look like Ted Rice. He wants to bulk up. So 129 pounds. He has a goal of benching 300 pounds. He's now benching 330 pounds. So if you just Google Ryan Hall Men's Journal, you'll see that it's just mind-boggling. So I break this down in detail in the book. The reason I share that is that's a 5-year transformation. He didn't go from 129 pounds to 190 pounds of muscle, benching 330 pounds. It didn't happen overnight. Did he have bad days? Did he have injuries? Was he depressed? Was he upset? Was he angry? Was he human? The answer is yes, but feelings and emotions are ephemeral. So what I'm taking a long time to say is that the three-pronged approach is truly the most important, right? Mindset, skill set, which is habits too, right? And so habits, stories, and environment. And then the emotions and feelings are important, but just not as important over 5 years. And so Ryan Hall is my proof for that.
Yeah. I love that story.
And you're my proof. You're my proof for that.
Oh, nice. I appreciate that. In what sense? In what aspect?
So you've gone through your own personal transformation, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and it didn't happen overnight. It was a many year process. And then, of course, what one tends to want to do is share that and teach that as part of your journey. So it makes sense.
Yeah, that's so true when you put it that way. I mean, to get here, probably most of the time, I didn't feel good or didn't feel like doing what I needed to do to get to where I am now. Probably most of the time, especially after those, the tragedies that I've talked about. Yeah, that's such a good, important point. And what would you say about like people who have the excuse where I know this is the name of your book, Everything's an Effing Story, but just to get into it.
Can I show the title?
Yeah, sure, man. Yeah. For those of people who are watching it on YouTube, they can see it. but everything is a fucking story. But the U is asterisked out effing story. Everything is an effing story. So, what about those people who do have that story about why I don't feel good and that's why I'm not where I want to be?
Well, one of I believe you said it on my podcast, and I still use it. It's beautiful. It's this idea of immersion, and you even posted about it the other day too. It's hard to be depressed, sad, angry, frustrated when you're jumping out of a plane. Now, not that everybody has to do that, or you're scuba diving, or you're learning to kite surf, or you're doing push-ups, or you're doing sit-ups. The answer is it's simple to be caught up, and it's no judgment. I've been there. The power of habit, as you know, operates at every level. It operates at the mindset level, our thinking, our stories. So those stories just keep running on repeat mode over and over and over and over and over. Using the environment to break that cycle is what you've been proposing with, I just, the scuba diving analogy is awesome because it's true immersion in water, right? But here's an example. So at this SC event, a few people came up after, and this one gal, she was clearly super intelligent, and she, I'm presuming, had a tinge of depression and angst, and so she's looking square at me, and she goes, "What you said about story, I just want you to know, a boy told me last week that I need to drop all my effing stories." And she's telling me this like it's a revelation that I'm sitting here teaching that we think in terms of story. So, but then she goes on to say something like, and this was sad. She goes, but everything's meaningless anyways. And I was like, oh, like my heart sunk. And then I just looked at her, and she goes, her eyes lit up, and she goes, "That's a story, isn't it?" And I was like,
That's a story too. Yeah.
yes.
Amazing.
She caught that at that moment. And so it was like a light bulb went off. She was caught up in this, and then I'm like, look, you're absolutely right. 500 years, this moment may have zero impact on anything relative to 500 years from now. But right now we can choose where meaning comes from by our thought process and the stories we craft. So, and those influence our skills and behaviors. They set up the parameters for our achievement. So it's real important, and that's understatement, to get our stories correct. And so part of this book is, if everything is a story, and it is, what are the most important stories? And I'm not going to put you on the hook for that, but that's something to meditate on. If everything's a story, by the way, here's a quick example. Have you, and you probably haven't, and it's okay, but reflect on the definition of story. So if I was an alien, and I mean like an alien from space, and I came down and I said, "Ted, I keep hearing this word story. Explain that to me." What do you say?
Yeah, I would say it's a wow, it's a right, it's a construct, it's a bunch of words describing a situation that through personal experience or designed to it's not easy. What is a story?
Yeah, no, I'll make it easy. I'll make it easy for you. You're very, very close. And you're right. This is the craziest part about the definition. If I witness an accident, I'm giving you a factual account. This is the story, right? So this, by definition, it's fact. It's also by definition fiction. I could be spinning BS, and that's a story too. Now, I want you to realize, please, how nonsensical that is. There are only so many words that are their own opposite. Very few.
I'm not following, Martin. What do you mean exactly here?
So the definition of story is fact, and it's fiction. It's its own opposite. That would be like me. Let me give you an example. Here's my refrigerator, Ted. It's also an oven. There are so few words where something is its own opposite. And in English, they're known as a Janus word, an autoantonym, or contronym. All this means is it's nonsensical. To say that a story is fact, oh, by the way, it's total BS. It's fiction. This is all, what I'm trying to get at here, Ted, is this is proof that everything is a story. Everything. If it's fact and fiction, you follow?
Yeah. I'm using for sure. Well, I think that there is, for example, there was an auto accident. The car, the BMW got hit from behind by the truck, right? But that's, we could say fact, but are you saying that then we tell a story about, oh, it was horrible and there was someone was, their leg was hurt and they were bleeding. It was so traumatic, right? Is that what you mean? So there's the facts and then there's the fiction, or you're saying it's all just made all fiction?
No, it's fact and fiction. It's by if you go to Merriam-Webster right now and you look up the definition of story, it's fact, it's a factual account, and it's a fictional account. My point is, it's a word that represents its own opposite. It's mind-boggling. We accept this. We don't think about it much or at all. And it's absurd.
Yeah.
It's totally absurd and nobody catches it.
I can't say I'm wrapping my head around that 100%. But what I would say that I am taking away from this is that we need to be extremely aware of the specifics, what you might call the facts, the accounting of the incidents. For example, I sat on the chair and opened my computer versus, like I was excited to interview you today, or I was, you know what I mean?
Here's another example. If I say, give me a definition of everything, you can do that, right? Just the word everything. What's everything?
It's everything.
Yeah. Okay. So you're not also saying it's nothing.
Right. But nothing is part of everything, right?
Well, yeah, we could get into philosophy, but if you look up the definition,
I'm not a philosopher.
I love philosophy, but yeah, there's no doubt nothing is the source of everything, but that's not what I'm asking. I'm saying, what's the definition, the word everything? And it's basically, it's what you said. It's everything. So you could not say on Merriam-Webster, it's not going to say nothing. Are you following now? So it says it's fact and fiction. Merriam-Webster. Yeah, I think you're following me now.
Yeah, it's something, it's worth considering. So yeah, wow, we've covered so much. And one thing I'll tell you, Martin, I love this simple approach. It got a little confusing for me at the end there, but this simple approach that you've taken kind of intuitively from your observations of coaching people, the four areas that you work with people on, the PAR, the plan, act, record, reassess, and then the 3 circles, the mindset, skill set, and environment. I love that because it's simple. It just seems more, it's the most simple framework for understanding what we're trying to achieve, why we may not be achieving it, and what to change, if anything, to move forward. And certainly the story is a big part of that as well.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much. For those of you who can see this, sorry, that's kind of what it looks like. Story is at the heart. And the conduits, Ted, the membranes are the feelings and emotions. And then the habits and skills and behaviors are in the center. So those concentric circles, if one cannot get those in harmony, in congruence, they're going to struggle going from point A to point B. You're spot on.
Yeah. Martin, such a pleasure to talk with you today. And I have so much, I knew you were good. Obviously, I've seen who you've worked with, and some of your clients and some of your coaches are really high level people as well. For those who want to hear more about what Martin is up to, or more specifically, you read his book, you can go to thehabitfactor.com or everythingastory.com. So that's everythingastory.com, all one word.com. So yeah, it's amazing. And if you had to give one parting piece of advice to the listeners today about what we've talked about, what would you say?
Oh, there's so many, there's so many different ways to go. Everybody knows kind of what they know. A few things. If they reflect. One of my favorite quotes, Ted, is wisdom is equal measure experience plus reflection. Wisdom is equal measure experience plus reflection. I believe that's Aristotle. Wisdom comes from experience and reflecting. So the advice is to reflect and get clear. Brian Tracy loves to say that 80% of success, right, is just having clarity. And if one is unclear, that leads to all sorts of challenges. So the path to clarity, I'm hitting you with a bunch of quotes, muddied waters left to stand become clear. So meditate, get still, find clarity. And then the other thing they sometimes fight is tracking. Some people think life is for living. It's not for tracking. The truth is it's not an either or. You can live. Some of the most successful people I know are living the greatest lives and they track every day something. So my point is get clear and track. That's it. Follow PAR. If you go to thehabitfactor.com, you download, I believe it's habitfactor.com/templates. You get this tracking sheet and that will teach you the PAR method. The other thing is, I don't know when this is airing. If it happens to be in the very near future, everything is launching right now. Everything, the new book. So we're doing bonus gifts and relative to coaching groups and support and just an insane ton of gifts and bonuses if they buy early. So those will be at the everythingastory.com website if it's still during launch week.
We'll get this up in time for that. It launches on today is October 6th. We'll get it up on October. We'll get it up ASAP for you.
Yeah, October 11th is launch week begins. Right?
Gotcha. Okay. So we'll see what we can do. Well, listen, Martin, it's been an absolute pleasure with you talking about habits, talking about your frameworks that you've developed over decades of doing this. Thank you so much. And man, let's definitely do this again soon.
That'd be great, Ted. As I said, I'm a fan of you and your work, and you continue to inspire millions, or at least hundreds of thousands. So stay after it, buddy.
Thanks so much. That's it for today, my friend. Hope you learned a lot from this interview. I mean, Martin, he's an OG when it comes to habit creation. And I just love the framework. It's fascinating and simple and effective. And like I said, I've already been using it with my clients just after talking with him. So I hope you were able to take something away from this interview that you can put into action as well. And certainly his book is worth checking out if you're into what we talked about today. If you want to hear a different perspective on setting new habits or achieving goals compared to what's out there now. I feel like Martin's a successful entrepreneur, but he's a bit of a hidden gem at the same time. Are you a busy professional who's crushing it in your career or in growing your business, but you're struggling to lose weight and transform your body while fitting in your social life as well as your work obligations? If the answer is yes, well, let me help you get into the best shape of your life while thriving in your business. Go to legendarylifepodcast.com/apply and schedule a 15-minute strategy call with me today. And on Friday, I'm going to share something really personal. I'm going to talk about the 10 lessons that helped me go from broken to living the life of my dreams. As you already may know my story, I've had a lot of loss. My mother died when I was 14. My brother was murdered when I was 19. My sister committed suicide at 36. I mean, it's just a heavy story. The reality is that I'm really enjoying my life in spite of the loss. And it's hard for a lot of people to connect the dots. In fact, someone asked me, like, how can you be living such a great life when your whole family is gone? And I talk about that in this episode. I talk about how these lessons help me go from really the rock bottom that I've hit more than once to bouncing back and finding meaning. And really importantly, this is a question that people have been asking me for years, and I've really struggled to answer it. So this is my first organized attempt to share some of the lessons from the adversities that I've been through. And I want to say this, I'm sharing these lessons not as a way to entertain you with this story, but a way to help you overcome the adversities in your life. I hope that's clear. Sometimes I feel like, when I talk about this stuff, it's not always so clear what my intention is, and I want to be more clear about it. But why I'm sharing these lessons is to really help you learn something from my experience that can help you in your life today. So it's a very personal episode. If that's something that you find interest in, tune in on Friday. Hope you have a great one, and I'll speak to you then.